What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the same. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Weisz.
Hey, everybody. This is John Corcoran with Dr. Jeremy Weisz, and this episode is a little bit different. This is a live interview that we recorded at the Global Leadership Conference from Entrepreneurs Organization, where some of the best entrepreneurs from around the globe gathered in Washington, D.C. to share ideas and to learn about entrepreneurship. And of course, this episode is brought to you by Rise 25, where we help B2B businesses to give to and to connect to their Dream 100 relationships and partnerships, helping you to run a podcast so that it generates a referral pipeline and ROI.
Yeah, I mean, John, after both of us have been podcasting for over a decade, the number one thing in our life is relationships. And we're always looking at ways to give to our best relationships. And we found no better way to do that over the past decade than to profile the people and companies we admire and shout from the rooftops what they're working on. And this interview is no different. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should go to rise25.com to learn more, or email us at support@rise25.com.
Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the interview.
Enjoy. All right, Jeremy Weisz here. We're live from EO Global Leadership Summit, and this is brought to you by Rise 25. I'm here with Tom, and Tom, tell people about you and what your company does.
Sure. I'm Tom Schwab. I'm the founder of InterviewValet. We do podcast interview marketing. Basically, our viewpoint is that you can't break through the noise, right? Most people are just adding to the noise. They never get heard. I believe the best way to get heard by your ideal customers is to get in on the conversation they're already listening to. And we help coaches, consultants, entrepreneurs, brands do that with targeted podcast interviews.
You know I've been podcasting for over a decade, and there's little people I find that have been doing it this long, except for you. So how did you get started in this industry?
Well, I think you just said we're both old here, but we're both tenured in it. And I look at it as the world is not evolution, or not revolution, it's evolution. So I came at it from an inbound marketing perspective, using content to attract, engage, and delight customers. And 20 years ago, that used to be guest blogging, right? To write a guest blog, get that authority, get that exposure, all the benefits come from that. And then back in about 2004, I started to hypothesize, 2014, I started to hypothesize, could you use targeted podcast interviews for that, almost like guest blogging? So that's where I came from it, and it's been great to see the journey and meet great people along the way and really see where podcasting has emerged to.
Let's talk about the power of podcasting. What do you see? Because you said before it was blogs, now it's podcasts. Talk about the power of podcasting.
Well, I think it's the same reason, right? Tapping into other people's audience, getting people where they are. And I think actually the idea of podcasting is going to be laughable when somebody listens to this in about 10 years. Because in 1920, radio was called wireless telegraph. And by 1930, it was radio. Sort of the same thing with podcasting, right? Nobody remembers what an iPod is anymore. And what is a podcast? It used to be audio. Now we've got 70% of them are video. A podcast, if it's on YouTube, is it still a podcast? You can find them on Facebook now. Sirius XM just bought some podcast networks just for the content. So I look at it as podcasting is really interesting stories, conversations that can be time warped over any time. You can listen to it when you want, where you want, in the format you want, and it's really an amazing thing that allows us to create in the way that's easiest for us, and then reproduce in the way that's easiest for our clients.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it on the head. It's like, if you look back with the websites, like if you have a business, you have a website. It didn't always used to be like that, and I believe if you have a business, you will have a podcast at some point. Talk about, the type of clients you work with. And I know you had a consultant.
Mm-hmm. So we work with a lot of coaches, consultants, brands, and authors, really people that are the best kept secret. something that is more of a relationship sale than a transaction, right? If you're just trying to sell a widget, nobody needs to know who you want to be there or know who you are. But if you're really based on a relationship, on that lifetime value, they have to know, like, and trust you. And I can think of one client we had, a consultant. He was a CPA, a fractional CFO, and his business prior to 2008 was all brick and mortar in Long Island. And he came to us and he said, I want to diversify. I want a different client in every state. I want no two clients in the same industry. And I'm like, well, you should be able to diversify with podcasts that way. But you know, Jeremy, he used it as market research. After we worked with him for 3 or 4 months, we looked at the data and said, you did really, really well on this dental podcast. And he said, I love dentists, right? That's a great market, recession proof. They're professionals, good cash flow. Well, for the next 6 months, all we got him on was dental podcast. Now, fast forward a few years, and his entire business, well, probably 80% of it is with dentists. He's got his own podcast now that is focused on the dental industry. So he used it to grow his business, but also to really define his brand. You know, you've got an opinion, I've got an opinion, consultants have opinions, but he got the expert opinion by going out there and seeing what the market told him.
The best direct response marketers and copywriters in the world, that's what they say. Test, test, test. And so this gives them a channel to test across different industries to see what hits home, right?
Industries, messages, even calls to action, right? Every digital marketer knows one call to action, right? Our testing has always shown, give them 3 ways to say yes. A small yes to get them back to the website, a medium yes to engage with you a little bit more, and then the heck yes, right? If they hear you and they're like, oh, Jeremy and John, they're the answers to my prayers. They help people. You know, I need to work with them. Well, don't slow them down in a funnel, right? If they come with a credit card in hand, let them talk to the wizard.
Love it. That should be a t-shirt. Let them talk to the wizard. Small brands competing with big brands. You had a company that, you know, it's expensive to go to trade shows and compete with the big boys. So talk about that.
Yeah, and so this was a great company breaking into a new market, right? They were a small player in a huge healthcare market. Well, how do you compete with that? You know, are you going to go to head with one of the big behemoths? You go to a conference, and no matter what you do, no matter what your budget is, it's going to look insignificant. So they looked and said, how can we have these discussions on a different channel and really stand out? And they looked at it and said, well, let's have these discussions on podcast interviews. Now, it's still a small company. They're looking to start their own podcast when they get up to a certain level. But right now, they're just looking for backlinks. They're looking for the SEO value. They're looking for the new clients, referral partners. And I was just talking with their CEO, who's also the talent for it. And he says, I'm having fun with these. It's growing the business. Sales is loving it. And he says, marketing's loving it too, because every one of these podcast interviews, they're transcribing, they're turning it into blogs, they're turning it into social media. So there's so much power in there. You know, exposure brings opportunity. And I think today, one of the easiest ways to get that exposure is on targeted podcast interviews.
I mean, these are also evergreen that last forever. I know I have episodes, people reach out of something I did 7 years ago. So this stays, even though they're doing it now, it is there forever.
It is. And I don't know if it's forever. Maybe it's like a can of soup, right? It's good for 3 to 5 years. But that's one of the things we always tell our clients, you know, make it timely and timeless. Because while we're standing here and, it's new to us, somebody's going to be listening to this 3 years from now, and it's the first time for them. And it's always amazing. I've been doing interviews since 2014, and somebody will say, I heard you on this podcast. I can't even remember what it was or what I talked about, but you know what? They remember everything on there. And not only that, there's that vocal signature that you have. And they're like, I've heard you before. I recognized your voice. And now with more and more of the podcasts going to video, pre-COVID, 1 out of 5 had video. Now it's over 70 or about 70% include video. Now they're not only hearing you, but they're seeing you. And, you think about it, we'll jump on a plane to go talk to, dozens or 100 ideal customers. But you can get on a podcast and speak to thousands of them throughout time, and you don't even have to leave your home or office.
Tom, you give a lot of tips on being a good guest on a podcast. What's one that sticks out that someone listening is like, okay, this sounds great, I would like to be on podcast? What's a tip? How do you be a good guest for someone else?
Well, I think the key word is guest. Let's remember what it means to be a guest, right? If you invite me over to your home to be a guest for dinner, right? I'm going to be gracious. I'm going to show up on time. I'm going to come prepared. I'm going to bring value. And I think the people that come with their heart in that way to a podcast interview, they get so much from it. If you come to use and abuse the audience and look at it as a transaction, those are the recordings that get lost, right? But if you come as a gracious guest, show up on time, prepared, sounding great with professional equipment, right? You can spend $100 and get a great microphone. You make the host look like a genius for inviting you because you bring so much value to them. And then afterwards, be a great guest. Thank them. And how do you thank them? Well, by promoting the episode, by sharing that. If you're a great guest like that, word gets around and hosts talk to hosts, and you'll get a lot of interviews that way.
Tom, this has been fantastic. Where should people check you out online? What website should we send them to?
Best one is always InterviewValet with a V.com. Just go to InterviewValet.com. All the information's there. We've got a assessment. 10 questions. Will podcast interview marketing work for you? I wrote a book. I give it away freely because I want people to learn how to do this. It's called Podcast Guest Profits, How to Grow Your Business with the Targeted Interview Strategy. And like we said before, if you want to talk to the wizard, just go right there. You can get on my calendar too. I don't know if I'm the wizard, but you can get all of that at InterviewValet.com.
InterviewValet.com. Thanks, everyone.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like $100 grand.